Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salatu wa salam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in amma ba'd. Today's parable is in Surah Al-Hajj, verse 73. And in this parable, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the following, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ya ayyuhan nasu duriba mathalun fastami'u lah. إن الذين تعبدون من دون الله لن يخلقوا ذبابا ولو اجتمعوا له وإن يسلبهم الذباب شيئا لا يستنقذوه منه ضعف الطالب والمطلوب. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O mankind. So now he's speaking to both believers and non-believers. So all of mankind, a parable is given to you, so listen to what is said. Indeed, those who you invoke besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot create a fly, even if they were together for that task. Meaning, if all people were together in order to create a fly, then they won't be able to do it. Not only that, وَإِن يَسْلُبُهُمُ الذُّبَابُ شَيْئًا لَا يَسْتَنْقِذُوهُ مِنْهُ. And if a fly were to take something, all of them would not be able to take it back. ضَعُفَ الطَّالِبُ وَالْمَطْلُوبُ. Weak are the pursuers and the pursued. So this is an interesting parable that focuses on Tawheed, and it serves as an argument against shirk and invoking other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, speaking to all of humanity, is telling them anything that is invoked, and he uses the word tad'un, so from the word dua, and it kind of gives a little bit of specific context to where, yes, it's about worship, but when you think about dua, then dua is really is the essence of worship. As the Prophet ﷺ said, dua huwa al-ibadah. Dua is the essence of worship. And just to review that a little bit and unpack that just a little bit, because this is a huge topic in of itself, to better understand the parable here. Now, when a person makes dua, okay, there are a few things going on that makes it so unique in the realm of worship. So when the Prophet ﷺ says dua is the essence of worship, it's because the process of dua, what it symbolizes, what occurs, the dynamics, is indicative of who Allah is and who the one making dua is. It brings out the realities of each. So we as Muslims, when we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are some pre-assumptions there, right? It's not a random process, but there are presumptions by which we choose to invoke Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask him for help. And that presumption is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of answering our request. Not only that, he is capable of hearing our request. So you have these two elements here. And when we invoke Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are invoking someone who is, physically speaking, very, very distant. Right? He is above the entire creation. He's in a place that we cannot even fathom. It's beyond physics, right? It's not created, and it's not a place, it's not a space. The mind cannot comprehend it. But what we can consider is that he's above the throne. What is the distance between us right here on earth and the throne? It's very, very far. If the Prophet ﷺ said the distance between one heaven and the second heaven is 500 years, right? Very, very far. If it would take us so many years to reach, Mars, or to reach Jupiter or Saturn, it will take us many years to reach it. Well, how about going through all seven heavens, and each heaven is far bigger than the one before it. So it's very distant, but yet we still call to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, we call to Allah with whispers sometimes. We call to Allah in such a soft voice that the person next to us might not hear us, or might not even know what's going on. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears it. And Aisha radiallahu anha puts it best. When Khawla binti Tha'laba went to the Prophet ﷺ complaining and about her husband and what happened with her husband, Aisha radiallahu anha comments that I was in the next room and sometimes I can hear what's being said, other times I couldn't hear what was going on. And then the verse comes down, قَدْ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ قَوْلَ الَّتِي تُجَادِلُكَ فِي زَوْجِهَا وَتَشْتَكِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. Allah has heard the one who is complaining to you. And she said, SubhanAllah, Allah above His throne heard everything she's saying, but me next to her, just a few feet away from her, I couldn't hear everything. So when we make dua, there's a presumption that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears us. Now, if someone were to just go around saying, oh so-and-so, hey Sam, where are you? Right? And the person comes and says, hey, what's wrong? Where's Sam? He says, Sam lives in, he lives in New York, but I'm calling him. We would think that person's insane, right? Yet we invoke Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's a presumption that Allah's ability, the information that He possesses is perfect. It's complete to the most minutiae of details. Also, there's a presumption that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of answering it. Or else why would we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Would you go to a child and say, who cannot walk, an infant who's 3 months old, and say, oh so-and-so, can you go and repair the roof for me? I mean, we would consider that to be a form of insanity. The person is, he doesn't really seem to know what's going on in life. Yet we call out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask Him for the things that we not want. Sometimes it could be a very small thing like, oh Allah, help me pass an exam. And sometimes it's very complex and difficult and complicated things like, oh Allah, help the situation in Syria or in Myanmar or in China, our Muslim brothers and sisters. I mean, these are very complex, complicated issues that countries, the UN and with all its resources, the first world countries with all their resources, either they don't care, but if they try to resolve it, it's not an easy process. So there's that presumption there, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is perfect, and therefore we reach out to Him. There's another presumption that's going on related to the self, the one making dua, that I am incomplete and incapable of doing this myself, that I need help, I need assistance from another source, and therefore we reach out to that other source. So by making dua, you are indirectly recognizing and acknowledging your own weakness and imperfection and your need for help. So you have the element of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that His perfection, and you also have the element of our imperfection. And then because of our imperfection, we reach out to the perfect subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the essence of ibadah, in the sense that it truly highlights the relationship between Allah and the created, between Allah and the one invoking Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you have those presumptions there. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now is criticizing those who invoke other than Him. And keep these presumptions in mind. So when we invoke Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're invoking Him because we believe He can do it. Now this parable is showing us how weak all other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is or are. And therefore none is worthy of being invoked except Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And anyone who invokes other than Allah is really setting themselves up for failure and weakness, and they are simply not acting rationally. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlighting the weakness of the creation. He points to one of the weakest of creations and the most annoying, and that is the fly. Right? And saying that those who you invoke besides Allah, whether they are a mythological character like Zeus, or a saint who was once a pious person during this life, such as a prophet, or a companion, or a spiritualist, or Isa alayhi salatu wassalam, or someone who's beyond those two. All of them are so weak that they cannot even create a fly. Right? Now, we as human beings, we like to invent. We're always inventing. We're always creating new things, contemplating, progressive thinking, etc. We're creating computers. We're now creating machines that have artificial intelligence, and we're going to outer space. And no doubt that at the human level, those are major accomplishments. However, let's really put things into perspective. My YouTube is on for Fufu. I had some problems just now or earlier So I had to redo it, but now it's on. There are some people viewing on YouTube. So let's look at really some of the dynamics here. Yes, we as human beings, we can create, but our ability to create is hindered or limited by the scientific laws that govern the universe. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He mentions that everything is under His authority, right? Some of His creation prostrate or accept that servitude willingly. Others don't accept it willingly, but they're kind of forced into a type of servitude. And that is that everyone must work within the realm that was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You want to create something, fine, but you have to take into account the theories of gravity. If you want to create something, fine, you have to take into account the theories of motion, right? So when a person wants to create an airplane, well, they have to take into account the laws that govern flying. I forgot what the aerospace and aerodynamics and all that. And they have to take that into account. They cannot go beyond it. And anyone who tries to go beyond it is going to fail. And they'll get fired from their job, obviously. So that's our capacity. So sure, we're able to make a small mechanical thing, toy that can fly around and go zzz, right? But let's compare that to a fly itself. Or let's compare an airplane to a fly. A fly can fly and an airplane can fly. But can the airplane fly with such precision and freedom like a fly? A fly will circle around, go quick, go up and down, etc. An airplane can't do that. It's very slow when it turns and it does it. It has to be very careful, or else it will be torn apart by the forces, at play. Likewise, a fly can fly can stick to something upside down. Right? So you see a fly and it's on the ceiling and it's upside down. Well, in order to get upside down, you have to somehow do something to fly upside down for a second. Right? And now it's upside down. Well, can we create an airplane that can fly upside down in a reasonable fashion without creating damage? Or that can stop midair, or can stick to a cloud, for example, or to a solid surface? Flies can reproduce. Well, can we make two planes that can reproduce and create a small baby plane? Absolutely not. So we as human beings, we are incapable of creating the smallest of things. Right? And this is just one example. A fly, create a fly. We can't. We simply cannot. And that just shows our own imperfection. If these deities that are being invoked besides Allah cannot create a fly, and all human beings will accept this, you can go to the most adamant of polytheists, the most dedicated of polytheists, and say, can your deity create a fly? Right? They might say, oh yes, they could create a fly, create this and that, but in reality, right, what's the evidence for that? Because they too will believe in a supreme God, by the way. Right? So call your idols. Go to your idols and tell them, create a fly, create something, make something happen. They're simply incapable of doing it. Not only that, if all of humanity, right, with all of these revered individuals or deities, right, if you were to bring all the prophets together, and all the companions together, and all human beings to come and try and create a fly, like the flies, just to copy it, not clone it, because cloning is you are taking something that already exists and making it another into two, right? No, we're talking about creating something from scratch. Then if all of humanity were to come together, then they simply cannot do that. Not only that, just to make things to push the point even more, وَإِن يَسْلُبُهُ الذُّبَابُ شَيْئًا لَا يَسْتَنْقِذُوهُ مِنْهُ. If a fly were to come and take something, they won't be able to retrieve it. Now, that should be a simpler process than creating a fly. But if a fly eats something and digests it, we won't be able to retrieve that. It's done, right? Something that was already there, to retrieve it again, we are incapable of doing that. And take all humans. Can a human retrieve something that a fly injected or digested? We cannot. That's simply the case. I mean, it's hard enough to catch a fly, let alone to retrieve something that is now inside its system. Now, some people today will point to this verse and say this is a scientific miracle, right? And because, a fly has a different process of digestion in that before it eats something, it spits some sort of acid that digests or decomposes that which is about to eat, and then so it's pretty much digested before it eats it, and then it just sucks it in and it takes the nutrition. And therefore, this is a scientific miracle in that it is impossible to retrieve something a fly ate because it's already digested before it even eats it, right? Contrary to, for example, a human being, let's say they swallow something and it's harmful, so they go inside the body, they cut the body open and they retrieve it before it causes damage to the body. Well, that's because the process of digestion still hasn't begun, and therefore we can retrieve it. Maybe that's true, but what I want to point out is that we need to be careful when it comes to the scientific miracles of the Quran, okay? And that is by understanding what a miracle is. A miracle is something that cannot be scientifically explained. So when the stick of Musa ﷺ transformed into a large snake, that is a scientific miracle because it's beyond science. Science cannot explain it, nor can science do it. Likewise, the virgin birth of Isa ﷺ is a miracle. Why? Because science cannot explain it. It goes against the laws of science. Reproduction occurs between male and female, and therefore when a female comes alone and a child is there, scientifically speaking, that is impossible. So the birth of Isa ﷺ is miraculous in that sense. And because it's miraculous, and this is an important point, because it's miraculous, we cannot prove it. You cannot prove something that is beyond science. Okay, so if someone comes and says, I don't believe that Jesus was born of a, so like for example, some Jewish people would do it and to refute Christianity and say that Jesus was a false person and just another rabbi who claimed prophethood or something like that. They'll say, it's impossible for reproduction to occur without without male and female. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quotes them and says that you guys are accusing Maryam alayhi salatu wassalam. And the answer to that is that, science can't prove it. Why do we believe it? Because Allah told us. In other words, if someone were to come to us, right, some lady were to come to us and say, I have a child and I've never, had any process of reproduction, right? This is a child without a father. It's fatherless. We're going to say that's not true. Why? Because it goes against science. But the reason why we believe Maryam ﷺ gave birth to Isa ﷺ without a father is because Allah told us so. Allah told us so. That's why we believe it. Right? Why do we believe that Musa's stick turned into a snake? Because Allah told us so. That's it. We believe in the Quran and we believe it's the word of Allah and Allah only speaks the truth. So we believe it in that regard. So that's the idea of miracles. Now, when it comes to the scientific miracles of the Quran, it's a little bit lesser in that the miracle can be achieved, not because science cannot explain it, but because at that time, the time of revelation, it was impossible for human beings to have known this information. And the primary example of that is the stages of the embryo in the mother's womb. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about that a few times in the Quran, right? Surah Al-Mu'minun, Surah Al-Qiyamah. He points to the stages of the embryo, Surah Al-Alaq, that clot of blood. It was impossible, right, for the Prophet ﷺ to have known that at that time. Now we know because we have the technological advancements to check it out. But back then it was impossible. And therefore it's a scientific miracle. And some people accept Islam because of that. Now, what occurs, unfortunately, often is people will promote something, a verse, as being a scientific miracle when in reality it's not. For example, مَرَجَ الْبَحْرَيْنِ يَلْتَقِيَانِ بَيْنَهُمَا بَرْزَخٌ لَا يَبْغِيَانِ. The two oceans or the two bodies of water meet, and between them is a barrier, and they don't mix. Right? Now we know this to be when fresh water and salt water meet, they don't mix. And you can see a barrier. Now you have YouTube videos, for example, and with the humming noise in the background, or a verse of the Quran being said, and oh my God, mashallah, it's beautiful, right? But is that a scientific miracle? Not necessarily, because that information may have been known by explorers back in the day, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Also, another problem that occurs is that people will use fabricated and weak hadith and say that this is a scientific miracle, right? I can't think of any examples, but I know this has come before. And there's actually a popular individual in the Middle East who's well known for the scientific miracles of the Quran, etc. There was even a class that I took, scientific miracles in hadith, in my bachelor's degree in Jordan. But you have this problem using fabricated and weak hadith, and it's a sensitive issue, because people will come and say, you guys are saying that this is a scientific miracle, and you're explaining it this way, but science has shown it's not the case. One example of that is in Surah Yunus, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَالْيَوْمَ نُنَجِّيكَ بِبَدَنِكَ لِتَكُونَ لِمَنْ خَلْفَكَ آيَةً. And this is in regard to Fir'aun when he drowned. Today you'll find this commonly translated as, today we are going to preserve your body to serve as a sign for those after you, right? So preserve your body. And then recently you had the discovery of Fir'aun's body in the Red Sea, and now it's on display in museums and whatnot. Oh my God, the Quran, scientific miracle, etc. But in reality, when you look at the scholars of tafsir and they explaining this verse, the word najja does not mean preserve. It means, in this context, in this verse, for something to rise up and be visible. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, today we are going to cause your dead body to float on the surface of the water, so that Bani Israel, the children of Israel who fled from you, see you and are reassured that you are now dead. That is what the verse is saying. Now what happens when all of the Muslims, or these Muslims who are celebrating the discovery of Fir'aun's body and it's in the Quran, come and say this isn't Fir'aun's body? Carbon dating it actually does not fit the time frame we suspect Fir'aun was living, the Fir'aun of Musa alayhi salatu wasalam. What happens then? People say, look, the Quran is wrong, the Quran is false. I mean, this is a big problem for the Christian faith. Information in the Bible that is clearly incorrect, right, creates a lot of doubt. So do be careful of this. Now, is this a scientific miracle? We need to really look at what the verse is saying, what it means, and then authenticate the science behind it. And then we can decide whether or not this is a scientific miracle, right? And can this be observed by the naked eye, right? Can someone, let's say they have their hand out and they have some sort of something that flies eat, and they see a fly come down, they're observing, and they see that the fly spits something and something happens to that thing they're about to eat, and then they eat it. Is that observable? So we need to be very careful. Are there scientific miracles in the Quran? Yes. And the primary example of that is the stages of the embryo. That is clear, and that's clear cut. But it doesn't mean there are multiple scientific miracles spread throughout the Quran. There could be, but we have to be very careful before we determine something to be a scientific miracle. That's number one. Number two, the Quran is not a scientific book. The Quran is not meant to be scientific. Yes, there are some scientific information there that scientists can use to build hypotheses or theories, etc. Fine. But the point of the Quran is to call people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The miracle of the Quran is the message itself, right? That is the miracle of the Quran, the message itself, and therefore our focus should be to the message, okay? Not to say we cannot use scientific miracles to attract people and convince them, I'm not saying that, but our iman needs to be built on the message of the Quran, not because there's some interesting scientific phenomenons in it. And one more thing I'll add to that, I kind of went to a long tangent, is what's called the number miracles of the Quran, al-i'jaz al-adadi. Right? There's this thing where you can each letter represents a number, right? And then they do things where you look at this verse and you take the numbers and you add here and subtract there and divide there and multiply there, and you come out with this number, right? One example of that is that the state of Israel will collapse in the year 2022 or 2023. This is a theory that's spreading and it's around. And the way they do is they look at the numbers of this word and that word, etc. This is very problematic. And you don't find this in a tradition at all. In fact, this converting of letters to numbers is actually found in the Jewish tradition, not in the Muslim tradition. It has nothing to do with Islam, right? And I don't know of scholars prior to modern times who ever suggested something like this. And so that's one thing. A second problem of that is that there are no laws that govern this. Okay, fine. You take these numbers and you came out with 2022, right? Now, so they do it by saying, you add the numbers of this word with the numbers of the second word and then subtract it by this third word. Okay, now my question to such people is, why did you add here and subtract here? Why not subtract here and add here? What's governing that? This is contrary to mathematics, where 1 plus 1, you're adding two things because you're increasing the numbers. Or you're subtracting because there's a decrease in the numbers. Or you're multiplying because there is a multifold of numbers, or divide, etc. There are laws that dictate that. We cannot put two things together and say we need to subtract 1 minus 1 equals the number that you see ahead of you, right? But when you come to this number miracles of the Quran, there are no laws that govern it. Why did you add here and subtract here? Why not divide here and multiply here? What is governing that, right? And then you find so many inconsistencies. Like if we add this verse with verse 4 down, and then you take this word from here, and it's inconsistent, right? They're making it to where it fits what they're trying to do. And by the way, people have gone to the extent to say that the Day of Judgment starts in this year. That is borderline kufr, apostasy or blasphemy, because the Prophet, it is clear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, no one knows when the hour is. And for people to come and start claiming we know the hour when the hour is because we calculated it in the Quran, very problematic. So do be careful of that. So to conclude the verse, ضعف الطالب والمطلوب. Weak is the pursuer and the pursued. Now there are two opinions among scholars as to who's being referred to here. One opinion is that the talib is the that which is being worshipped besides Allah, and the matlub, the pursued, is the fly. So weak is the one being invoked besides Allah, and weak is the fly. Both are weak. They're weak because they're creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in need of Allah and other than themselves. The second opinion is that the talib is the one invoking a deity, and the matlub is the one being invoked. So these two are both accurate opinions, and they get the point across. The first one is pointing to the weakness of each, and because these deities are weak, they are not worthy of being worshipped, right? And the second opinion is that the one invoking other than Allah is weak, in that they put themselves under the mercy of a weak entity. And this will be further discussed when we talk about the parable in Surah Ankabut of the spider. So weak is the one invoking other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they're putting themselves in a vulnerable position that's not going to get anything done. And weak is the one being invoked for the reasons that we discussed before. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to be on the side of strength, the side of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to allow our hearts to be connected entirely to Him, because He is worthy of being connected to, and He's worthy of us seeking subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we can go ahead and stop there. Anyone has any questions, please do ask. I'll give it a moment for the live stream to catch up. Wa alaikum salam to all those who said assalamu alaikum. Wa iyyakum. So OCIF plans on having a semi all-night qiyam, if that even makes sense. Inshallah, we should release the flyer. I hope hopefully today. I'll start working on it. So we hope that it can, be of some solace to you all, and a type of alternative. So inshallah, do share the message and the flyer once you do get it. Any suggestions that you all have, please contact me. Let me know. We'd love to hear any ideas that you may have. It's really hard to do something over live stream to replace our normal all-night qiyam, which tends to be, alhamdulillah, a very good experience. But la'allahu khair, inshallah, there's good in it. People need to learn how to worship Allah alone. People need to learn how to worship Allah at their homes. And that qiyam al-layl, Ramadan can be just as much fulfilling and engaging at home as it is in the masjid. So hope to see you then, inshallah. So we'll go ahead and just stop there. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.